we can start.
Okay.
So you look at me.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are just talking.
Okay.
So Elias, it's a great pleasure to meet you here on Tenerife Island during retreat of our precious teacher Chogyal Namkhai Narbu, connected with Londe series of teaching. And I know very well that Dzogchen is the most important part of your life, and it penetrates all your thinking, action, etc., including your research in the field of philosophy and transpersonal psychology. I know that you accomplished several years ago 3-volume research into the foundation of transpersonal paradigm, so to say, and you analyzed in details the most important teachings from the field of transpersonal psychology, like Stan Grof, Ken Wilber, also other teachings about transpersonal theory of consciousness, perception, etc. And transpersonal paradigm was very important for Western psychology, since it brought into attention the issue of ultimate human values, ultimate human goals, enlightenment, meditation, altered states of consciousness, uniqueness of human being, and explain human situation in kind of new terms. But transpersonal paradigm is still Western psychology, Western science. It's good privilege, and also its limitations goes from this field. Can you explain the essence of your analysis of Ken Wilber integral approach?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm glad to meet you here also in this context of these teachings, and we are Vasha brothers, and so it's a very good way to have an interview, yeah? And just coming down to Ken Wilber, well, I would say that one of the main problems I see with Ken Wilber is his evolutionary approach, both phylogenetically and ontogenetically. For example, ontogenetically, he sees human life like we are born and we begin to build the structures, and then each structure that we build has to be built over a preceding structure. And then when that one is built, we build another one.
Only when we accomplish previous stage, we can go to the next.
Exactly. And then the problem is not so much that we have to accomplish a stage in order to be able to go to the next stage, because we have also this in Lam Rim, in the graded path of Tibetan Buddhism, and in the gradual Mahayana, and even in the Tantras. Dzogchen is not like that, but we have it in all these Buddhist teachings, and that's valid and valuable. But the problem is that each structure has to be kept for another one to be built, and then another one to be built, and then enlightenment is like the highest structure that we build. And in Buddhism, we have one radical differentiation between Sanskrita and Asanskrita, Duche and Dumache in Tibetan. And Sanskrita is whatever is built, created, intentional, constructed, compounded, contrived, and Asanskrita or Dumache is whatever is not produced, is not built, is not made, is not like Wilber system is a little bit like the Babel Tower. Yeah, we are building a tower to reach heaven, And that's not the way to reach the heaven of enlightenment, which is not heaven, something produced or something like that, but which is the base, what we are originally since timeless time. So whatever we can produce that way will be destroyed sooner or later, and it will not be authentical. So I think that everything boils up to this. My criticism of his ontogenetical, of course we can go into further detail later on if you so wish. Then phylogenetically, there is an analogous thing, yeah? Then he sees, for example, primal peoples as people who are missing something. Also there are structures to be built
underdeveloped.
Exactly.
In many senses.
Exactly. So there is almost like a fascist approach. Maybe it's a little bit too heavy, the word, but it goes a little bit on that direction. Also, even politically, he proposed, for example, a synthesis of Republican and Democrat in the United States. Yeah, a middle way between the two of these, and. Even, I mean, this is far right. I mean, all the Democratic president didn't want to sign the Kyoto Treaty. If we go on like that, this world is going to be destroyed. What we need is something green, something very different, yeah? And this idea of looking down at primal peoples is really like we want to feel superior. Then also he says, for example, that the people, humankind was not prepared for enlightenment until the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, for example. And in the Dzogchen teachings, we have that since the primal times, the first time when there was human beings, the Dzogchen teachings were given and enlightenment was attained through the Dzogchen path. So this evolutionary idea has absolutely nothing to do with the Dzogchen teachings or with the Vajrayana teachings or with any Buddhist teaching. Rather, the idea is the opposite, is that there was a golden age, an age of perfection, and then the degeneration proceeds through stages because we begin to develop delusion, and delusion begins to get stronger, and then everything goes worse and worse and worse until finally there are the final conflagration, which is like where at the point where either the world is destroyed or either there is a regeneration, or else.
Am I right that your analysis goes from the point, from the argument that if there is something ultimate perfection, enlightenment, it's beyond any evolutionary perspective, any concept of time, space, human history, etc., etc. Since if we put this idea inside this context, we are limiting them.
Exactly, and not only limiting it, but the very
making them impossible.
Exactly, because then whatever is produced is going to be destroyed. So there cannot be final liberation, definitive liberation in a system like that, that you have to have another structure on the top of all the previous structure. In Buddhism, and especially in Dzogchen, we have to see through all structures into the base.
But maybe your point of criticism is too absolute, so to say. Maybe on the relative plane there is still some evolution, some science, some evolutionary perspective. And maybe we need just complement Wilber integral approach, some absolute ideas like self-perfected state.
I don't.
What do you think?
I don't know whether that is possible, because, for example, I mean, the very idea of Wilber, for example, you see this idea. He says that for the time of the Buddha was enlightened, but nowadays the Buddha wouldn't be enlightened. It's like even the Buddha is incomplete now. So we have to be better than the Buddha. There is this idea of being better than, and that now we can be better than in the past. And that very idea is the very opposite of the idea of reaching absolute equality, which is the state of Dzogchen. There is nothing superior, there is nothing lower. Absolute equality, yeah, is one taste. So,
but this evolutionary perspective is only one of the several major aspects of Wilber's integral approach. The other are, for example, 4 quadrants, and also male, female, different types, etc., etc. What do you think about this?
yes, you are right about that. There are some part of his system that could be rescued maybe, and it's something that he shares with other authors also, and that I have shared myself. For example, among the quadrants, there are different levels of organization, and we cannot say that the level of organization of matter or of the physical, what physics studies, is the same as that of mind. I mean, mind is far more complex structures than this, let's not say lower one, because it looks despective, it looks like looking down on it, but more simple and more elementary level. And there has been a trend in these new paradigm thinkers of reducing everything to the level of physics. And I quite agree with Wilber that this is not right, We don't have the same levels of organization.
Any types of quadrants reduction to 1 quadrant and any types of pre-trans fallacy are dangerous also.
Exactly. Well, the pre-trans
is delicate in the context of your critical evolutionism. Yes, I understand.
Exactly.
But also there is some point when in a kind of general philosophical arguments some higher stuff is reduced toward psychopathology, for example, and it's dangerous. For example, mystical experience is considered a psychotic one.
There was this famous correspondence between Romain Rolland and Freud, in which Romain Rolland brought to Freud the idea that the child has this oceanic feeling, and that mystics also have this oceanic feeling, and Freud somehow looked down on it, and he thought that in children this oceanic feeling implied a feeling of being unprotected. The right word is not coming to me. To be exposed to danger, to be not to have. And that in mystics that was psychotic. So that is a very great advance of transpersonal psychology, also anti-psychiatry. Also Jung, he was like a pioneer on this, He also realized that neurosis could be attempts of healing for a somehow alienated human mind. So all these trends have been very valuable, and that's why I am in the field of transpersonal psychology, because I think, and actually even used the word integral. In 1986, I gave some series of lectures, and the series on psychology I called integral psychology, because it seems to me like that the name was very appropriate. But when I learned that integral was associated to this evolutionary approach, and I came to know Wilber more closely, and then I saw all that he developed after that time, then I dropped the label.
And what is, you belong to the field of transpersonal psychology, to International Transpersonal Association, and what is your vision for the future paradigm? How we can integrate all transpersonal findings, ideas, since there is a lot of precious things in the field?
Yes.
What is your vision?
Yes, I think, for example, that for example, Diabasis in California, they did a really good job with psychotics by letting them go through the psychosis rather than trying to stop it. The world has never seen such a rate of healing, between inverted commas, of psychotic people. I mean, psychotic people who managed to integrate into society afterwards and that became far saner than they were before, and probably far saner than many normal people. So that's one thing that we should incorporate. For example, Wilber has developed this spiritual emergency network.
Growth.
Growth, I made a mistake, the Growth, I mean, Christina and,
yes, exactly.
and Stan. And that is also very valuable, Like also the Philadelphia Association in England, produced by Ronald Lang, David Cooper, and all these people. What I think is that what I would hope for would be like a marriage between Buddhism and Dzogchen, of course, and analog spiritual liberation systems such as Sufism, Taoism, Shaivism, and so on, like a marriage between that and transpersonal psychology, so that transpersonal psychology would learn to distinguish, for example, Wilber, his integral psychology, and also transpersonal psychology, there is no distinction of, for example, there are transpersonal and holotropic conditions which are part of samsara, and they are constructed, they are built, and they are destroyed later on, and when they are destroyed, that's a source of suffering. And there is nirvana, which is not produced, which is awakening, is enlightenment, and there is a state called kunji, which is technically samsara, but where neither samsara nor nirvana are functioning. And all these distinctions are not made either by Wilber or by transpersonal psychology. We have to learn to make them, because, for example, I have a transpersonal experience, a holotropic experience of totality, maybe I feel I dissolve with this sky, I have a panoramic awareness, but there seems to be someone looking into that immensity from behind the eyes and identifying with that and feeling proud that he is that. Then that is delusion. That is something built, that is a source of pride, and it's going to be a source of a fall later on that is going to be very painful. So we have to learn to distinguish that. Also, like for example, in psychedelics, also people don't distinguish the real effect of psychedelics. For example, what is the effect of psychedelics? I would say they have a holotropic effect. Well, it depends on the psychedelic, of course, but for example, LSD and similar psychedelics, they have a holotropic effect. They tend to make your awareness more panoramic, and at the same time, what I call an epochotropic effect, from the Greek word epoche, which means suspension of judgment. So perhaps because of the panoramification of awareness, you have in this more total condition, and then maybe because judgment takes longer to come into perception, then you have no subject-object duality. You are fused with this space and you feel immense. You feel very full, you feel plenitude. And then immediately a subject comes and identifies with that. That first moment was kunji. It was technically samsara, but neither samsara nor nirvana were active. Then the second moment, there is a subject that cognizes this immensity, and then he feels, oh, I am that, and then feels proud from being that. That is formless realm, is the highest realm of samsara. That is not awakening. And people normally don't make this distinction. Then perhaps after that, maybe you single out something, some object of perception.
Does it mean, for example, that in transpersonal field, in transpersonal theory, we should distinguish better between experience and theory, for example, between how we are grasping and imposing ourselves on reality, for example? how the mechanism of projection is working, what is really the theory, and how it's connected with our egos, with our limited paradigm, with our limited view, and re-evaluate a kind of transpersonal vision as primal in comparison with transpersonal theory.
Yeah, I think that what you are saying is right. Yeah, without having destructured ourselves, we begin to produce theories which are then somehow conditioned by our ego and our delusion, and then we try to somehow make all these experiences fit into the structures of delusion, and that's what cannot be done. We need, I don't know anyone who became fully enlightened in the West without following a teaching. There have been people who have, has happened to people throughout history. We have had Buddha, and in Dzogchen teaching we have the Tempas, the 12 masters which reintroduced the whole system of teachings every time they were lost. But we don't have anyone like that in the West. So long as no one like that appears in the West, we have to learn from tradition. We cannot just think that we are self-sufficient because we are Westerners and we are 21st century and we are the top of evolution. And now we are better than everything that came before, and we have to flush everything down the toilet that has been produced by tradition. And so my ideal is that transpersonal psychology becomes informed from tradition, and that people begin to learn from tradition, and then making all the necessary distinctions. Maybe transpersonal psychology will be able to help people going through psychosis, to help people who are confused when they have holotropic experiences and they don't know what's happening to them, and they make them have orientation. Nowadays, transpersonal psychology is not able to provide orientation to people who are lost in space because the theories themselves are lost. They don't have a real orientation. It's like you don't know that the north is that way and the south is that way, and then you try to go south, you go to the north maybe, or you go to the east. So,
Elias, and do you think it's possible to define enlightenment from modern transpersonal point of view, or realization? Doesn't matter. This idea.
Yeah, well, I could say what is not to begin with. Yeah, for example, Ken Wilber, he sees it as a conceptual and dualistic condition. Let me explain myself. For example, you have this sixth fulcrum. He associated with, for example, anguish, existential anguish. You know, the angst of Kierkegaard and Heidegger, and angoisse in Sartre, and so on. And then you have the next level, which was the centaur fulcrum, the seventh fulcrum. And he said, for example, that maybe you were walking through nature and the dualistic perception dissolved and you were one with the tree, and then he says you identify with the tree. That's not clear. Then he mixes that with the nirmanakaya in Buddhism, which is not correct, because nirmanakaya is not attained when you are walking through the field and something happens to you that way, and it's not like a dissolution of duality where after that there is an identification. Then he speaks of next level, yeah, which is this level of archetypes, and he doesn't make the point that for that to be Sambhogakaya, there could be no duality between perception and the archetype, and there could be no conceptualization. Just by the manifestation of the archetypes, that this is Sambhogakaya. And then the most dangerous are the next two levels. Then you have the ninth fulcrum, and in the ninth he mixes many things. Yeah, for example, there is a witness who is different from what is perceived, which is like the sakshin of many different Hindu traditions. And he explains that you are fully asleep and at the same time fully awake. That has nothing to do with Mahayana Buddhism or the Dharmakaya in the Tantras, and far less Dharmakaya in Dzogchen. That has nothing to do with Dharmakaya. And then he identifies that with Nirodha Samapatti, which is an absorption or cessation in the Hinayana, in the Theravada, for example, where there is absolutely no perception, no realization. That is not the Dharmakaya. There is a lot of confusion of this type, yeah? And he also identifies it with Nirvikalpa Samadhi, for example, in Hinduism, which is also a state of cessation of mental activity. In Dharmakaya, you don't have cessation of mental activity. I mean, you have cessation of dualistic.
This your critics of Wilber maps and mistake considering higher states, higher levels. But can you define enlightenment?
I was going to define it by contrast, yeah? Then he comes to the tenth, which is the non-dualistic tradition. And then he says that in that tradition, on that fulcrum, you have dualistic perception, but you didn't take it seriously. This is not Buddhahood. Well, the Gelugpa in Tibet conceived Buddhahood in this way. And Wilber was influenced by a man who is the head of a tradition which has been accused of heinous crimes, of murdering with many, with a knife, yeah? Two of the most important collaborators of the Dalai Lama. And he's taking this Gelugpa approach that he took from this Lama. All the other traditions don't accept this. Yeah? In Buddhahood, you don't have duality at all, and you are absolutely beyond taking concepts as true. You don't perceive sentient beings to be helped, and through you, beings are helped spontaneously. It's very much like this Chan concept of non-action, also Taoist, or action through non-action. Everything happens spontaneously. You are not acting, but everything happens to you. You don't perceive beings to be helped, but they are helped, and you are in absolute plenitude because you don't feel separate from the plenitude of the whole, and you have absolute perfection because you don't have self-interference, self-obstruction, self-encumbering. Everything happens perfectly. Like in the Chuanze, you have this Chui the artisan used to make circles by hand better than with the compass because his faculties were integrated and he didn't suffer impediment. So it's a state of total plenitude and perfection. That is the meaning of Dzogchen. Dzogchen, Dzogpa means full, like plenitude. And it means perfect, like when an act is done perfectly, that also Dzogpa. And Chenpo means big, but in this case, according to Chogyal Namkhen Norbu, is total, because big can be bigger or less big. Here is total because it cannot be bigger. So it means total perfection and plenitude. So that is the condition, that is how I would define awakening, as total plenitude and perfection. Absolutely beyond any self-obstruction, beyond any aims, beyond everything happens spontaneously. I don't think it can be defined, but you asked me to define, so I'm trying to do my best.
The point at least.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome.